Thanks so much for having me. Hi. Is there a clicker or something? Cool. This guy? Great. Thanks so much for having me. It's so much fun being back in Tel Aviv and chatting with all of you. My name is Amanda Cassatt. I was Chief Marketing Officer at Consensus between 2016 and 2019, where I built the first Web3 marketing team. Oh, thanks. And brought things like Ethereum, MetaMask, the Consensus brand, a bunch of the other companies in the Consensus portfolio to market, and also a ton of things that didn't work out, but we won't focus on those. Then started a company about 3 years ago called Serotonin, which is the largest Web3 marketing firm. We also do Web2 to Web3 transformation and have a product studio. We basically reinvest our profits in building software products that we raise venture into and spin out once per year. The first was Mojito in 2021, which is NFT e-commerce. And the second was Franklin this past year, which is a Web3 crypto native payroll tool. I also have a book that I'm going to shill a bit coming out in April. It's available for pre-order on Amazon. If you look at my Twitter, amanda.eth or Amanda Cassatt, it's linked in the bio there. Or you can just look it up on Amazon and pre-order it now if you are interested. But a lot of what I'll be talking about today are the lessons from that book, which I basically wrote down after 7 years of thinking about the same thing over and over. There we go. So the first thing is, what is marketing in Web3? A lot of folks come to the word marketing with prejudices and biases from the Web2 world. You think about influencers on Instagram hawking a vitamin water with #ad, but it can be something really different in Web3, which is almost like a market maker. You're connecting projects with users and community members who would use it if only they learned about it. You're solving the 0 to 1 problem of building early community. So even if you've created a wonderful mechanism for a system to be essentially self-marketing, for people to be motivated intrinsically or extrinsically to help build your project, how do you get them in the first place? Well, they have to discover it, they have to join your community, they have to engage with you. You have to get that flywheel of growth spinning somehow. So marketing solves that problem, even if you plan to stop marketing and turn over a lot of those functions to your community eventually. And then it's about, if you are a real kind of dyed-in-the-wool Web3 project, instead of building a giant centralized marketing team, eventually decentralizing your marketing functions to the community over time and making sure there are those people that are incentivized to carry it forward. There are a lot of differences between marketing in Web2 and Web3, which actually are an argument for why Web3 might have more sustainability long-term and be able to outcompete Web2 companies. So when you're marketing in Web2, like think of a standard like consumer packaged goods company that's marketing on Instagram or Facebook. Think about like a software company that's marketing on one of those platforms. You're basically just arbitraging the cost of customer acquisition with the lifetime customer value. And that arbitrage takes place on these third-party platforms like Google Ads, like the Meta Suite, and you're constantly paying out to those third parties.
Let's switch, please.
Thanks. Oh, awesome. Thanks. So you're constantly paying out to those third parties to keep spinning the growth flywheel and to keep on reaching your own audience. The difference is in Web3, it's mostly owned and earned marketing, and we'll talk a little bit more about what those things are, as opposed to paying out to these big Web2 third-party platforms. So in Web2, you see companies building really large centralized marketing teams, and you see those marketing activities really top down. When I was working on marketing Ethereum as CMO of Consensus, I did not have the opportunity to do, centralized top-down marketing activities. I couldn't tell, Vitalik what to tweet. That would be ridiculous. I couldn't control what other people in the community said about Ethereum. So you aren't controlling the message. You aren't deciding this is what we're going to say. What you're doing is bottoms up. You're feeding memes and ideas to people in the community that can decide whether they want to use them or not. And so it's a lot more community-focused, bottoms-up style marketing activities where you're arming people to talk about the things they care about, as opposed to controlling what everyone says about a certain project. And that leads to building way more flexible, lean teams. But there are certain things that, yeah, it's interesting that isn't moving on the screen. All right. Well, there are certain fundamentals that are the same between Web 2 and Web 3, and these are just things that anyone building a company should know about marketing, which is it's really important to know your product. Often the people that are in charge of marketing aren't engineers or aren't developers. Well, often they are, especially at the beginning, they're the founders. But those people should get to really know the tech. They might not know everything down to the atoms and electrons, but they should be dangerous. And then knowing your audience. Who are the people that are actually your potential users? Making sure that they actually exist and that your target user base isn't some fake thing that doesn't exist anywhere. Talking to those people. And then identifying the channels where they live. Where is their attention focused? What are they paying attention to? And then how are you going to get your message across those channels to those people? Well, you need to boil down your product into kind of the most salient key message and deliver it across the channels where your audience lives. Then you build a funnel, and we'll talk a little bit about the marketing funnel, so that after they first discover you on the channel where they first meet you, they are led through a series of calls to action to do the activities that matter most for your business. And then you measure the effectiveness of how well that funnel is working by seeing how well your target audience converts through the funnel through the various calls to action. So the word community obviously comes up all the time in Web3, and it actually, I think, has a pretty tight definition that makes it usable, which is an incentive-aligned group that works together toward the success of a project. Super simple. And we can talk about community channels, so that can be something like a Telegram or a Discord, but the idea of community in Web3 isn't a channel, it's a concept, which is that Web3 is a substrate for building incentive alignment. And the group of people that's brought together by those incentives, whether they're intrinsic or extrinsic, is your community. In Web 2, there's really bright line distinction between a company or a team, their investors, and their users. All three of those groups are at arm's length from each other and often even have adversarial interest toward each other. Part of the innovation of Web3 is collapsing those categories into a single economically aligned group, and that's where we get to community. I'm not going to go through all of these, but it could be useful if you're building in the space to just take a picture. These are basically all of the major marketing channels. So there's owned, which means that the asset that you're putting your message on is yours. You can do whatever you want with it. Things like your blog, your email, your website, your social channels, your community channels, events. You own those things, so you can have them say whatever you want. The question is about distribution, whether anyone's going to care, whether anyone's going to share them. Earned is like third-party social proof, so it means that someone else has to agree to carry your message in some way. So that can be when you get placed in the media. It can mean speaking at someone else's event. It can mean placing content like a guest post or an op-ed. Partner co-marketing, which is something I'm going to talk about, which is really great for Web3 projects, and organic influencer marketing. Usually at Serotonin, we don't encourage doing that much paid marketing activity until there's some kind of revenue capture for the project. So like having some kind of cash register, having some kind of thing that you're selling such that you can actually measure the ROI of your marketing activities. You probably shouldn't be spending a bunch of like CapEx style marketing expenses on this stuff until you can measure it coming back in revenue. But once you can start measuring that, these things are really useful. You may be doing small campaigns on things like Google Ads and Meta, like we just talked about, but there are also opportunities to be like a podcast sponsor, YouTube shows, broadcast, obviously social ads. You have to really know your audience. There are a lot of target audiences that really don't like seeing a promoted post on a social channel, so you should not do that if your audience doesn't like that. But there are also audiences that don't mind it. And then paid influencer, which can get a little bit tricky in our space, which I'll talk about. And then people forget about environmental. You can buy physical ad space in the world of bits instead of the world of atoms. And oftentimes people take photos of that and put it on Twitter, so you get 2 birds with 1 stone. Again, not going to go through all this, but if you're interested in this, this is a graphic from the book that just goes through the Web3 marketing funnel in detail. Basically, where a potential user first discovers your brand, maybe that's on social media, maybe it's at an event, and that's your opportunity to get in front of them with your message and your brand that's designed to convert them to the next step, which is engagement. And basically, engagement is where the potential user agrees to be contacted by you again. So you have the opportunity then to reach out to them for a second time. Maybe they've joined a social channel, maybe they've joined a community channel, maybe they've signed up on your website to get an email notification about a beta. Whatever it is, it lets you talk to them again. And you kind of can keep them in an engagement holding tank. That's basically like what a community is from the perspective of a marketing funnel. A holding tank for people that you can then convert to using your product when you're ready. Then converting people to using your product when it's ready, when you want them to, and then retaining them to make sure they don't slip out and go elsewhere. And you can create referral programs for people that are in this retention part of the funnel to send their friends back up into the discovery top of the funnel so that it should be self-reinforcing. You can see on here that each of the different stages is catalyzed by a CTA, a call to action, which is basically a catalyst between these steps where your potential user or community member would either choose to do the next thing or not. And you can measure whether those catalyst points are working with your metrics and optimize them in order to convert better. When you're first starting a Web3 project, there are some kind of non-negotiable things you need, which is you need to figure out what your brand is. It needs a name, maybe a word mark, logo, and your key message. What's your elevator pitch? What is the thing? You need some kind of marketing strategy. How are you going to get this thing into anybody's hands? You need a website that's basically your storefront, some kind of social or community channel. We never recommend starting channels that you don't actually have the manpower to staff or have a plan on how you're going to staff. So being really conservative about that and making sure that if you do start a channel, that someone is assigned to put content on it or maintain it. And then content. That doesn't mean like encyclopedic long articles every day, but it just means some kind of social messaging, blog content, something about who you are and why. Your website from the very beginning is one of the most important things because that's an asset that you completely control. Everything that happens on there is on you, the marketer, because no one made you make your website something that you didn't want. And it needs to be optimized in terms of real estate to convert people to do the things that matter the most to your company. And that thing is probably your primary call to action. So you want to think of real estate on your homepage as being proportional to the thing that you care about having people do. This obviously isn't, a super polished, late stage, Series D company website. This is a super simple startup website, but it's kind of the basics of what you need on there. You want to make sure people don't have to scroll too much in order to do the thing that you want them to do. You want to put your most important actions on what's called the hero, which is what appears right when people land on the page or above the fold, so they don't need to scroll. You basically lose people proportionally to how much scrolling you ask them to do. And so all of the extra information, how it works, why it's great, who our team is, that people will really need to care about you a lot to be interested in, that can be below the fold. This is kind of interesting. I think a lot of people assume that your audience and your brand just grows linearly over time, but actually attention is sort of jagged, and there are these very special moments in the life of a project where they have an opportunity to get step function growth in terms of building their community, in terms of growing their user base. And so it's really important for marketers to focus a lot on these particular moments to get them right, because not every moment is created equal. So the first catalyst is often a blog post, here's who we exist, with your main message and keywords. Sometimes it's a fundraise announcement. Often a second catalyst will be, a major partnership announcement. Often a third will be something like a big earned media feature story about all the traction that you've gotten. But this is important to, got to optimize those individual events that are going to be way more important than your other day-to-day marketing activities. So we obviously, I think at Serotonin and with the team that we built at Consensus, many of whom have been working together now for 7 years in this space, we've just seen a lot of these projects, and every project is different, but there are a lot of patterns when it comes to marketing that are consistent across many of the projects we see. And so these are kind of big data exercises, or medium-sized data exercises, let's say, in things that we've seen work over and over for early-stage companies doing their marketing. So this is something that we call instant incumbency. It's a strategy that we recommend to a number of our projects that want to make sure their users trust them. Oftentimes, in terms of visual branding, a new project can look very new, right? It can look very kind of startup-y, it can look niche, it can look fly-by-night, and if it's something that a user will need a lot of trust to engage with, they may be less likely to convert if something feels untested and new versus if something feels legitimate. And you can convey that sense of legitimacy with how your brand looks and feels, even if you're very new. And so that's our kind of trick for visual branding. In terms of messaging, we recommend creating what we call a knife's edge message. A lot of our founders come to us saying, my product does X, Y, and Z really well, but it's hard for someone who's just discovering your product for the first time to remember 3 things. The truth is they can only remember one thing. A great example is Volvo. A lot of people think of Volvo as the safest car. Volvo might also have a great sound system. They might also have great horsepower, but that brand has the opportunity to have one hyperbolic message that everybody remembers. So you need to think about what that is for your project, even if your project does 10 things. And it's often hard for founders to do that because they're so proud of all of the different features that they have, but you have to choose the one that has the tightest match with what your audience wants the most and cares about the most. And then that wedges open the door for you to share all your other features with them later once they've gotten interested because you were able to distill your value prop down to what matters most. I don't even know what I was supposed to point this at. There we go. So on product websites, and you might have seen this on the graphic earlier, we recommend a wall of trophies. And a lot of projects have amazing users, like companies that are using them, individuals that are using their product, and they're hiding their light under a bushel by not broadcasting on the hero section of their website that they have those users. Because a potential new user arriving at their website is going to see projects like mine, people like me, or projects that are more advanced than mine, people that are farther along than I am, are already using this, and that'll make them more likely to convert into using your product. If you think about it, like a DeFi website that has metrics like total value locked on it is doing wall of trophies because they're demonstrating, okay, this is how much capital trusts this project with their assets, which is going to make it more likely for a new person to trust the project with their assets. Another one, so constant co-marketing, social proof, aka partner marketing. it's very limited what you can credibly say about yourself or about your own project. Obviously, everyone thinks their own project is good. It's much more credible to have third parties carry your messaging and to say the things that you want about your project. Sometimes those people will be investors. Sometimes they'll be members of the media. Sometimes they'll be partners. If your project is partnering with a bunch of other Web3 startups, use that opportunity to cross-amplify each other's posts, share with each other's audiences, and put your knife's edge key messaging in the mouth of that partner, where it's going to be a lot more credible than you just saying nice things about yourself. So this is one that we recommend a lot for when projects haven't launched their actual product yet. Oftentimes projects will think, oh, we can't do any marketing, we can't work on building our community because our product isn't live. Well, it's actually a lot better to launch into some kind of community that already exists in order to be able to get feedback and in order to make it, you know, a launch that isn't just dead. So you want to do something even before your product is live to bring those early community members in. And the way to think about that is thinking about your brand as a niche media company or as a niche community. Like, let's say your project is about privacy, or let's say your project is about security. You can basically create like a privacy-focused content engine that engages people editorially with interesting content about, let's say, privacy, or let's say ZK, or whatever it is that you're doing, and brings them into the community, even if your actual product isn't ready yet. I think there's one more. Yeah, I guess that's it. All right, maybe I'll take some questions. But first, just super quickly about Serotonin. We're in almost every time zone, expanding into Asia this year, about 110 people. We do PR, content marketing, social media, community, paid growth, influencer, basically the works. A lot of our partners are very technical Web3 projects. They want to focus on R&D and product, let us do the rest. We do that, or we modularize things a ton. We work with a bunch of Web2 companies also that are getting into Web3. These are just a few of them, but if you look at serotonin.co, you can look at a lot of the projects that we work with. And we also build products ourselves, as I mentioned earlier, like Mojito and Franklin. So check out what we do and would love to chat and maybe work together. And that's where you can follow me. If you look at my Twitter, my link to buy the Web3 marketing book, if you're interested, is in the bio there. Follow Serotonin, my Twitter. Shoot me an email if you want, amanda@serotonin.co. We'd be happy to chat.
Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere.
Do you want to take questions?
Don't go anywhere, Amanda. All right. Thank you for this amazing presentation. I want to ask you a personal question before we get questions from the audience. Think about your questions. You've been doing this for 7 years, right? So I'm not going to ask how you still have your hair, because that's fine, you're a different gender. But how are you, like, how were you able to manage this psychologically? Because this is like your third bear market, really. What do you do to keep your sanity?
Well, I think that if your entire emotional life revolves around your crypto portfolio because you have no friends or family, then it's going to be a lot harder to survive anything. But if you have stuff that you care about outside of crypto, then it softens it a bit. Also, like, just kind of the whateverness, like seeing it as fun, seeing it as a game, not betting more than you can lose.
That's good. That's a good tip. Make sure you have friends and don't estrange your family. They're important as well. So any questions for Amanda that you're going to make me run with the mic to you? I know the first question is the hardest, so let's start with the second question already. Okay, you have a surprise question. I'm going to come to you. Think about a question. You have 20 seconds. Here we go. All right, a question for Amanda. Well, it's surprise question time. It's ever than that, I asked the question. Questions, everyone? Anyone? There you go, Peter. Peter, you're from Fireblocks, you're from marketing. So Amanda, expect a knife edge question.
Don't worry, no knife edge. My question is around messaging for a lot of like similar projects within the space. I feel like often people, I mean, we know that Web3 is probably more a marketing term than it is an actual technology term, or at least that's how it's used. What's kind of your best advice for a lot of these smaller Web3 companies who are all, on the surface, it seems like they're providing something similar because they use these larger buzzwords, but then you need to balance it out without going all up front with super technology terms.
Wait for me, Amanda.
Yeah, so I would say that actually, first, Web3, I think it's actually interesting because terms sort of have a Darwinian evolutionary competition, and that term Web3 has always existed, but it recently, I think in 2021, it became dominant because there were so many non-currency use cases like NFTs that were becoming popular. And so there needed to be a term that didn't refer to the currency side, but that was rather kind of a catch-all for all the different things that you can do with blockchain-based, decentralized systems. And so I think Web3, which is a term that had been around a long time, got selected for in that kind of evolutionary process because there was a need for a term that was more blanket, that didn't make everything, financial. I think that's why that term got kind of resuscitated. In terms of key messaging, I think a lot of projects should try to create a new category rather than being one of something that came before. So figuring out what does your project, you're not one of something, that there's probably already a winner in that category, something larger in that category. What does your project do that defines an actual new category? And then coming up with new terminology for what that category is. I think that's a really great way to differentiate, especially for something small and new, as opposed to just being a newer player in an already existing field. So would recommend that. And then would recommend genuinely differentiating. If your project sounds the same as everyone else's project, it might be because it is actually too similar or it's solving a solved problem. And so I would look at that and think, okay, is my product actually different? If it is, how can I describe that difference in a way that creates a new category? And the new category, it's working through mimesis. If other people are using that terminology that you created, then you actually have created a new thing. And you can be the market leader there and everyone else can follow behind you. Does that kind of answer-ish? Awesome.
Amanda, thank you so much for making it. Thank you, Amanda. Please, big round of applause for Amanda. Thank you, Amanda Cassatt, co-founder and CEO of Serotonin.